shadow of justice. Under gray skies, beneath the looming architecture of the Chicago Federal Courthouse, Jasmine Crockett stepped out of a black SUV, her expression calm, her resolve unwavering. The civil rights attorney wasn't scheduled to speak that morning. She was scheduled to be judged, accused of defying a federal court order for intervening in the deportation of Venezuelan asylum seekers. Jasmine stood at the center of a storm she had willingly entered. To the system, they were case numbers. To her, they were people, terrified, begging for a chance. Inside, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Camera operators tracked her every step. Politicians whispered behind closed doors. And on the judge's bench, Richard Alden waited, cold, precise, a man with a history of rulings that always seemed to favor structure over soul. The courtroom-packed capacity fell silent as Judge Alden leaned forward, his voice slicing through the stillness like a blade. "Miss Crockett," he began, eyes narrowing, "you knowingly exceeded the boundaries of your legal role. This court issued a direct federal order, and you chose to disregard it." His tone was calculated, each word delivered like a scalpel meant not only to accuse but to humiliate. You interfered with a deportation proceeding that was fully sanctioned under federal law. You had no jurisdiction, no standing, no permission. Around the courtroom, pens stopped moving. Breath was held. And yet you took it upon yourself to obstruct enforcement officers and delay a flight for nearly 22 hours, he continued, his voice rising slightly. You acted as if your personal conviction could override the rule of law. Jasmine stood motionless, her hand steady, her expression unreadable. But inside, she could feel it. The system had already written her guilt in ink. Then something shifted. Jasmine took a slow breath, her hands resting calmly on the edge of the table, her voice low but with the precision of a blade. "You accuse me of disrespecting this court," she began, locking eyes with Alden. "But I'm not the one disrespecting justice." The room went still again, as if everyone could feel what was about to come. Let's be honest. This isn't just about me delaying a deportation. This is about what happens when someone dares to question the machinery, when someone refuses to let a process built on silence run uninterrupted. She stepped forward now, into the spotlight that had been built to burn her down, and turned it into a pulpit. "Your Honor," she said with chilling clarity, "we both know this courtroom doesn't exist in a vacuum. We both know the rulings that come from this bench echo beyond these walls, and we both know certain voices are louder in your chambers than others." A few gasps escaped from the gallery. One reporter's pen stopped mid-sentence. "There are patterns," she continued, eyes never leaving Alden. "Petitions submitted, denied, delayed, always favoring one side, always in sync with brief from outside groups with political goals and donor lists longer than their moral codes." The judge shifted in his seat. "So no," Jasmine said, voice steady and full of fire. "I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to say what no one else will say in this room." And then she delivered the line that would go viral before the session even ended. "The law cannot be a shield for the man sitting on the throne. It must be a weapon for the ones at his feet." The room didn't react immediately. It froze. Every breath held. Every thought stopped. Alden sat motionless, caught between fury and calculation. Jasmine didn't stop there. She reached into her briefcase. The metallic snap of the latch echoed like a warning shot. Then came the envelope, manila, thin, but more dangerous than a loaded weapon. "Since I've been accused of undermining this court," she began, "let's talk about what's really been happening behind those chambers." She placed the envelope on the clerk's desk, her movements exact and unshakable. Inside is a sworn affidavit, signed, dated, filed by Cameron West. "He worked in your office, Judge Alden, for 4 years." The judge blinked once. Jasmine didn't. "He saw everything," she continued. "He watched legal briefs from a so-called nonprofit, Justice Horizon, land on your desk before they were even filed in court. He saw you review them, edit them, send back comments." Shocked murmurs swept across the rows like rising smoke. "This isn't speculation," she said, her voice rising with each word. "This is evidence, emails, drafts, internal memos, and your own initial sign on edits that were never supposed to exist." Her hand hovered above the envelope. "This isn't about politics. It's not even about me. It's about you, a federal judge, secretly coordinating with outside interests to steer the outcome of legal decisions while pretending the bench is neutral. The air cracked with tension. For a moment, it seemed even the walls were listening. Alden's voice came out colder now, but thinner. "This is a disgraceful ambush, Miss Crockett. You're not here to practice law. You're staging a circus." Jasmine didn't flinch. Her voice didn't tremble. She looked him dead in the eye. "No, Your Honor," she fired back. "This isn't a circus. It's a spotlight, and I'm pointing it right where it belongs." The clerk didn't dare touch the envelope. Reporters were already typing, whispering, capturing every word. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Alden reached for his gavel, but this time there was no conviction in the motion, just damage control. "This court will enter immediate recess pending review of the submitted document," he declared, voice brittle. He stood quickly, his black robe sweeping behind him like a curtain closing on a collapsing act. He didn't look at Jasmine. He couldn't. The room detonated, not with violence, but with voices. Reporters scrambled to their feet. The clack of keyboards sounded like a machine gun. Breaking news out of Chicago. Judge Alden just recessed without rebuttal. Confirmed affidavit. Confidential seal. Source, former court staffer. The word spread faster than wildfire. Outside, Jasmine stepped into a swarm of microphones. Unlike most, she didn't raise her voice or rush to the cameras. Instead, she said one thing, measured, firm, unforgettable. "I'm not accusing anyone. I submitted proof. There's a difference." Within hours, the Department of Justice confirmed what everyone suspected. An official investigation had been launched into potential judicial misconduct involving Alden and outside influence from Justice Horizon. Behind the scenes, the engine was already roaring. Federal investigators submitted emergency subpoenas for digital records, server access logs, archived emails, metadata. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Emails between Alden's office and Justice Horizon strategists were recovered, marked time-sensitive alignment and early draft feedback, keep internal. Financial reports showed a side foundation affiliated with Justice Horizon had deposited over $75,000 in consulting fees to a political advisory firm operated by Alden's former law clerk. It wasn't just smoke. It was fire. But as the evidence grew, so did the counterattack. The backlash against Jasmine began with whispers, then sharpened into a campaign. Commentators flooded the airwaves. Headlines pivoted. They didn't say whistleblower. They said agitator. Political blogs picked up an old student activist clip of Jasmine speaking at a protest 15 years earlier. She was 19, standing on a folding chair, shouting into megaphone, "Burn it all down if it was never built for us." Taken out of context, it now ran on a loop, painted as her true agenda. The attacks weren't just media-driven. She started receiving anonymous calls. A brick was thrown through the window of the law clinic where she volunteered. Donors threatened to pull funding from civil rights nonprofits that had once supported her. The message was clear: stay in your lane. But Jasmine didn't back down. 3 nights after the smear campaign peaked, she walked into a primetime broadcast studio alone, without handlers, without preconditions, and sat across from one of the toughest anchors on television. When asked if she regretted blowing up a federal courtroom, she responded with surgical calm. "I didn't blow anything up. I revealed what was already broken." The anchor pressed harder. "People are saying you're dangerous, that you've compromised judicial neutrality by going public." Jasmine's eyes locked on the camera. Her voice dropped, slow, controlled, unmistakably clear. Justice doesn't exist to protect the reputations of men in robes. It exists to protect people who don't have power, don't have lawyers, don't have cameras watching. And if the truth threatens their comfort, then maybe they were never holding justice, just control. Justice cannot be censored by fear. Not in my courtroom. Not in this country. The studio went quiet. The control room froze. Seconds later, social media exploded with clips of her statement. Less than 72 hours later, Judge Richard Alden was placed on immediate administrative suspension. U.S. Marshals arrived at his chamber's door. They didn't come in shouting. They didn't need to. Their presence alone was a siren. By federal order, your duties are suspended. Effective immediately, you are to step away from a bench. All official access is revoked. For the first time in decades, Alden didn't speak. He didn't question the order. He simply stared at the document, at the marshals, at the career slipping through his fingers like sand. The younger marshal, barely 30, reached over and removed Alden's access badge from his lapel. It had been clipped there for 20 years. He had walked into hundreds of courtrooms with that badge. Now he would never wear it again. But the story wasn't over. It had only just begun. With mounting evidence too damning to ignore, Congress convened a hearing to address systemic failures in judicial ethics and influence. At the center of it all, called to testify not as a lawyer but as a witness to the truth, was Jasmine Crockett. The committee chamber was packed. Senators lined the dais. Cameras lined the walls. Jasmine entered through the East Wing entrance, not flanked by security or aides, but walking alone, her heels tapping the marble floor like a drumbeat. When she was sworn in, her voice didn't shake. She took her seat at the witness table without glancing at a single camera. The senator leaned forward, voice quieter than the rest. Ms. Crockett, in your view, who was harmed the most in all of this? Jasmine paused, not for effect, but for weight. Then she spoke. The people who were supposed to be heard but never were. The immigrant mother deported before her asylum claim was processed. The teenager whose case was dismissed before he even got a lawyer. The families who came to court expecting fairness and found a script already written. That's who I'm here for. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her testimony wasn't loud. It was seismic. Just when it seemed the storm might pass, it intensified. An audio recording leaked, clean, chilling, authenticated. Judge Richard Alden speaking to a senior legislative counsel from the Senate Judiciary Committee. You write the law, I'll back the ruling. 9 words that blew the door off everything Jasmine had spent weeks trying to expose. By morning, the nation was on fire. Every headline screamed the same thing in different ways. A judge for sale, audio links court to Congress, the sentence that shattered separation of powers. The Speaker of the House issued a rare bipartisan call for Congressional Emergency Ethics Session. Senators scrambled. Staffers were called back from recess. No one could defend it. Not out loud, not even those who had looked the other way for years. Because this time there was no room for narrative. There was tape. But power doesn't retreat. It retaliates. Jasmine's personal email was hacked. Her law firm's internal server crashed. Private messages were leaked, some real, some doctored. Anonymous accounts pushed a narrative that Jasmine had manipulated evidence, coerced a federal clerk, even accepted money from advocacy groups. Then came the bombshell, a formal complaint filed with the State Bar Association alleging professional misconduct and demanding a temporary suspension of her license. The complaint was slick, dressed in legal language and manufactured outrage. It cited timestamps, client interactions, courtroom transcripts, every detail carefully cherry-picked, rewarded, reassembled into a weapon. Inside her office, Jasmine watched it unfold with the same cold stillness she had worn in the courtroom. But behind her eyes, it burned. Not because they doubted her, but because they knew this wasn't about her. It was about sending a message. Don't come this far again. Don't make us bleed again, or we will make you disappear. But what the machine didn't count on was Rebecca, Jasmine's co-counsel. Rebecca had built a career inside the very system now trying to crush her partner. She knew exactly how these things were constructed. Fake timelines, credentialed names, selective outrage, and misdirection. She didn't flinch. She went to work. First, she subpoenaed the IP logs from a complaint submission portal. Then she ran server forensics on the leaked documents. One by one, the holes widened. The complaint had been submitted from a network connected to a lobbying firm once retained by Justice Horizon. The leaked messages originated from an account registered to a burner device board and cached 2 weeks prior, 1 block from Alden's former clerk's office. The Ethics Committee convened in a sterile high-ceiling conference room. No cameras, no press, just legal minds in the war for one woman's name. Jasmine stood silent as Rebecca laid out the case, each piece methodically placed like chess moves. When Rebecca finished, the room didn't clap, but it didn't blink either. The chair of the panel looked down at the fabricated complaint, then up at Jasmine. This board finds no basis for the charges presented. This case is dismissed. This complaint should never have reached this room. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't nod. She just exhaled once, slowly, but she wasn't done. She rose from her seat and asked respectfully for the opportunity to say something for the record. They allowed it, and Jasmine stepped to the front of the room. I didn't come here today to clear my name. I came because this is a cause of exposing what we're not supposed to see. I've been called a liar, a radical, a threat to the system. But what does it say about that system when exposing the truth becomes a real crime? She paused, let the weight of it settle. Justice, she said, eyes locked on the panel, is never free, and sometimes it has to be bought with sacrifice. 12 months passed since the walls cracked. The country was no longer the same. 7 judges were formally removed from the bench in the largest judicial purge in modern U.S. history. 4 more faced federal indictments, their names etched into court filings once reserved for the people they used to rule over. But while most headlines screamed about scandal and collapse, something quieter had taken root: reform. The newly formed United States Judicial Reform Commission had been voted into existence by a rare bipartisan effort. There was only one name that made sense to advise it: Jasmine Crockett. She refused the title of chair. She didn't want power, but she agreed to serve as honorary legal advisor, overseeing ethical reforms, community outreach, and the early blueprints for a new federal code of transparency. She turned down all political offers, Senate, House, even talks of a cabinet seat. She declined them all, not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but because she understood something most didn't. When the fight is as personal, the stage is the last place you belong. So she left the spotlight and built something instead. On the south side of Chicago, inside a renovated red brick post office, she opened the Colonial Law Institute, a legal empowerment center for immigrants, low-income families, and marginalized communities who had never had the tools to fight back. No marble floors, no polished glass, just desks, open doors, and real people. The sign out front didn't carry her name, just a bronze plaque with one line: where the law learns to listen. One late afternoon, a boy, maybe 12 years old, pushed open the front door of the Institute. He wore a second-hand backpack, scuffed sneakers, and eyes that had already seen more than they should have. Jasmine looked up from a folder as he stepped in, hesitant but determined. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask about programs or paperwork. He just stood in front of her and asked, "Can you teach me how to stand up?" The words hit harder than any ruling, any headline, any gavel strike. She didn't speak right away. She closed the folder gently, leaned forward, and looked him in the eye, not like an adult addressing a child, but like a fighter recognizing another. Then she said, "You don't need anyone to give you permission to be right. You just need to never apologize for it. Standing up doesn't begin in a courtroom. It begins the moment you refuse to sit down when the world tells you to." Outside, the sun dipped behind the roofline of the old building. Inside, the room was quiet. It wasn't the kind of ending that made news. There were no cameras, no applause, no breaking headlines. But for Jasmine Crockett, this was a victory. Not the courtroom, not the hearing, not the headlines, but a single child stepping into a place that had once been denied to voices like his and asking not for permission, but for guidance. Because she had always known, justice doesn't end when the gavel falls. It begins when the next hand reaches for it. Justice is not something gifted from on high, doled out by black-robed arbiters to those they deem worthy. It does not descend in polite decrees or ceremonial gavels handed down from pedestals. Instead, justice lives in the tremor of a single voice raised in protest, in the steady footfall of someone who refuses to kneel when the world demands it. In Jasmine's fight, a simple maxim emerged: you don't need permission to do what's right. You just need the will to stand. When the judiciary's highest citadels trembled, it wasn't because laws changed. It was because people remembered their own strength. The final threads of her story were woven not in the glare of media cameras, but in small moments. The single mother who taught her daughter that the law could be wielded for love, not just punishment. The factory worker who walked into a union meeting and didn't look away when injustice was named. The teenager who found his voice in Jasmine's workshops and used it to reclaim his father's custody hearing. Each thread strengthened the fabric of justice, proving that it wasn't a trickle from above but a tide swelling from human resolve. In the end, the most powerful courtroom confrontation was not the one before judges and juries, but the one inside the heart of ordinary people deciding to act. Jasmine Crockett had wielded her own courage against a system built to resist. And in doing so, she reminded a nation of something essential, that justice is neither a monument nor a mandate. It is a movement, because the door to justice isn't locked by protocol. It's held open by the steady hand that refuses to be silenced. And in that refusal lies the greatest truth of all. We don't need permission to do what's right. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell.